So let me ask you something. Why do you do what you do? Really? Is it for the praise? Is it for the passion? Or maybe something else entirely? Today, we're going to dig into one of the biggest questions any creator, any researcher, anyone making anything has to ask. What is actually driving you?
So let's just get right to it with a really direct question. And I want you to think about this honestly. Are you working for the praise? Are you chasing that applause, that validation, that, hey, good job from somebody else? You know, it's a super common driver for all of us, but it can also be a really subtle trap. All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. We're going to look at 3 of the most common motivational traps out there: the approval trap, the admiration trap, and the self-image trap. And then, don't worry, we'll talk about the solution, how to build your own inner compass.
Okay, let's dive into the first, and honestly, probably the most familiar pitfall for a lot of us: the approval trap. This is what happens when our work basically becomes a performance for an audience, and their applause is the only reward we really care about.
Just think back to when you were a kid. For so many of us, the whole system was just simple, right? You study hard, you get good grades, and boom, you're showered with praise from your parents and teachers. That positive feedback feels amazing, and it programs us to connect our own value with what other people think.
But then something changes. You get to university, maybe your first real job, and all of a sudden, nobody's handing out gold stars anymore. You might pull off an A, but the big celebration just isn't there. That well of praise dries up, and if that was the main thing fueling you, you suddenly feel like your engine is sputtering out.
And this leads to this really critical moment of reckoning. When that external applause is gone, who are you actually working for? If you can't answer that question right away, it's a pretty big sign you might be stuck in that approval trap, looking outside for a sense of purpose that really can only be built from within.
So the crucial shift we have to make is this. The goal isn't to please everybody else, it's to satisfy your own internal standards. What you think of your work has to start mattering way more than what anyone else thinks about it.
All right, on to the second pitfall. This one's a little tricky because it actually starts from a pretty good place: the admiration trap. This is what happens when we graduate from seeking approval from people around us to measuring ourselves against our heroes, and we put them on a pedestal so high we can't even imagine reaching it.
Look, having heroes is a great thing. It gives us something to shoot for, but there's a danger zone. When that healthy aspiration turns into just passive admiration, it becomes a mental block. You start telling yourself, they're just on another level. I could never get there.
And this quote just nails the mindset of a true competitor. This is from the baseball superstar Shohei Ohtani, talking to his team right before the World Baseball Classic final. He told them, "Let's stop admiring the legends on the other team." Why? Because admiration creates distance. To compete, to really win, to get to the top, you have to see them as peers you are here to beat, not as idols you are here to worship. What a mindset.
And that brings us to our third and final trap. This one turns the focus inward, but in a really dangerous way. It's the self-image trap. And this one might be the most seductive of them all. It's when you fall in love with the idea of being a researcher or a writer or an artist more than the actual, messy, difficult work that it takes.
You know, this trap is fueled by this kind of self-intoxication. Your inner monologue isn't about the thrill of discovery or perfecting your craft. It's about how cool you look while you're doing it. The problem is, this kind of motivation is incredibly fragile because it's tied to an image, not the process. The second the work gets hard and unglamorous, which it always does, that cool self-image just shatters.
And this comparison really gets to the heart of it. On the left, you've got that brittle, external focus. It completely falls apart at the first sign of failure because it's all about looking cool. But on the right, you have the resilient, internal focus. This is rooted in the actual joy of the work itself, and that is what lets you push through setbacks, because your motivation isn't about looking good, it's about learning and creating.
So we've walked through the traps. The big question is, how do we get out of them? Well, the answer is all about forging an inner compass, or what the source material calls, quite powerfully, a spiritual backbone.
What this really means, at its core, is developing an internal standard of value. It's your own personal, unshakable benchmark for what's good, what's worthy, and what success looks like to you. It doesn't get swayed by a little praise, and it doesn't break when it's criticized. It is your true north.
I absolutely love this metaphor of a spiritual backbone. It's not just about being confident, it's about having this core structure of self-worth and purpose that literally holds you up, especially when the outside world isn't offering any support. It's the foundation that all great, authentic work is built on.
You know, if there's just one line to take away from all of this, it's this one. It just perfectly summarizes everything. The final judge of your work's value can't be your boss or your parents or your followers on social media. It has to be you.
So I'm going to leave you with this to think about. Is your compass pointing outward, always looking for direction from other people? Or is it pointing inward, guided by your own unshakable standard of value? Here's a little test. If nobody was ever going to see your next piece of work, would you still create it with the exact same passion? Answering that is the first step to finding your true north.